So the top three in my mind are cost, cost, and cost. Right. So very often when we have conversations with a potential customer through an agent or even direct, right, when those opportunities manifest themselves to have that conversation, usually the initial pushback that you get is, well, this is going to cost too much money. And very often that's in the context of, well, if I go out and I buy a $1,200 laptop and I divide 1,200 by 36 monthly, it's significantly cheaper for me to buy that laptop over a 3-year span than to pay for a DaaS seat. And that is 100% true, right? I'm not going to argue that point at all. Simple mathematics will bear that out. But the reason that that's an objective, the reason that is an objection, and the reason it's an objection that we can often so very easily overcome is it tends to be the result of a short-sighted approach to what DaaS is, right? That still very much relies on the idea of DaaS is just a remote computer that I log into in order to work remotely. And that couldn't be further from the truth these days, right? So, when we do a proper analysis of the costs of a DaaS solution, we need to take into account a lot of the soft cost components that go into managing a non-DaaS environment, right? You're going to have elevated help desk costs. You're going to have elevated administrative costs. You're going to have to pay for backing up those desktops or laptops wherever they may be to ensure the integrity of the data that's on them. You're going to have security costs for things like EDR, MDR, antivirus, anti-malware applications that are going to have to run at all those endpoints. And then, to come full circle, now your administrative and help desk costs are going to continue to mount because now you have to manage those separate entities, right? Those applications, those tools on all those devices as well. So it's very easy when you do a soft cost analysis and look at things like an up to 60% reduction in help desk costs associated with a desktop as a service customer versus a non-DaaS customer, in addition to usually an industry average of, I'd say, 20 to 30% reduction in administrative costs and administrative needs around supporting a DaaS customer versus a non-DaaS customer. And so much of that is because of that consolidation and more simplified approach to management of those desktops versus end user devices that are scattered remotely, scattered throughout an office, throughout branch locations, to one single environment, one single pane of glass, one single management environment. So from a cost perspective, right, once we figure out the right way of getting the customer to see all of the value beyond just a desktop that a DaaS solution entails, that usually becomes a pretty easy objection to overcome, even though it tends to also be the first one that pops in people's minds when they look to argue against the DaaS solution. The second highest one that I would say that we see is just the amount of work that's involved in change, right? So usually when we see a DaaS customer, they're not positioning against doing in-house VDI. They're not usually positioning against doing DaaS with a different provider. Usually they're positioning against status quo, right? Doing nothing, continuing on with things the way they are. So it can be a little bit of an uphill battle sometimes in that regard because sometimes doing nothing is the easiest path forward, but it's also the most surefire way to ensure that we're not increasing things like the security, mobility, productivity, and simplifying the logistics of our environment.